Aircraft once overshadowed by legends like the Spitfire and Lightning are finally getting recognized for what they truly were. This is the complete history of Britain's most underrated fighter aircraft ever built. From forgotten wartime interceptors to abandoned Cold War machines, we start with early propeller fighters. Westland Whirlwind, entering RAF service in June 1940, this twin-engine fighter became one of the most overlooked British aircraft of World War II. Overshadowed by the Spitfire and Hurricane during the Battle of Britain, it still carried 4 powerful 20mm Hispano cannons and reached 360 miles per hour. Production remained limited because of Rolls-Royce Peregrine engine reliability problems despite strong combat performance. Bristol Beaufighter. Overshadowed for decades by the famous Mosquito, this heavy fighter quietly became one of Britain's most effective night fighters and strike aircraft. Entering RAF service in July 1940, it carried radar, 4 20mm cannons, 6 machine guns, rockets, and torpedoes. The aircraft destroyed bombers, submarines, ships, and ground targets across multiple theaters during World War II. Now this is the Boulton Defiant, often remembered only as a failed turret fighter. It actually performed effectively during early wartime operations and later excelled as a radar-equipped night fighter. Entering RAF service in December 1939, it carried 4.303 Browning machine guns in a powered turret. German pilots initially mistook the aircraft for Hurricanes during combat over Europe. Blackburn Rock. This carrier-capable naval fighter developed one of the worst reputations of any British wartime aircraft, largely because of poor combat performance and low speed. Entering service in April 1939, it carried a 4-gun turret and operated from Royal Navy carriers. Despite its limitations, the Rock represented Britain's early attempts to develop turret-based naval fighter concepts before aerial warfare rapidly changed. Next up, late-war piston-engine fighters. Hawker Tempest. Overshadowed by the legendary Spitfire, this fighter became one of Britain's deadliest low-altitude combat aircraft of World War II. Entering RAF service in 1944, it reached 435 miles per hour using the powerful Napier Sabre II engine. Armed with 4 20mm cannons, rockets, and bombs, the Tempest proved highly effective against German V-1 flying bombs and late-war Luftwaffe jets. Hawker Sea Fury. Arriving during the rise of jet aviation, this aircraft became one of the most underrated piston-engine fighters ever built. Entering Royal Navy service in 1947, it reached 460 miles per hour and carried 4 20mm cannons alongside rockets and bombs. Despite being overshadowed by jets, the Sea Fury later became one of the few piston fighters to shoot down a MiG-15. Up next, de Havilland Hornet. This twin-engine fighter entered RAF service in 1946 but quickly disappeared behind the rapidly advancing jet age. Reaching nearly 472 miles per hour, it became one of the fastest piston-engine fighters Britain ever operated. Built largely from wood like the Mosquito, the Hornet combined exceptional range, high speed, and 4 20mm cannons for long-range operations. Blackburn Firebrand. Delays and development problems permanently damaged this aircraft's reputation despite its eventual effectiveness as a naval strike fighter. Entering Royal Navy service in 1945, it carried 4 20mm cannons alongside torpedoes, rockets, and bombs. Powered by a Bristol Centaurus radial engine, the Firebrand evolved from a troubled fleet fighter into a capable carrier-based attack aircraft. Continuing with early British jet fighters, Gloster Meteor. Constantly compared to the German Me-262, this aircraft became one of the most overlooked achievements of Allied aviation during World War II. Entering RAF service in July 1944, it became Britain's first operational jet fighter. Powered by twin turbojets and armed with 4 20mm cannons, the Meteor intercepted German V-1 flying bombs and later remained in global service for decades. De Havilland Vampire. Overshadowed by newer swept-wing fighters during the 1950s, this aircraft still became one of Britain's most successful early jet exports. Entering RAF service in 1946, the Vampire reached 548 miles per hour and carried 4 20mm Hispano cannons. Its distinctive twin-boom design later served in over 25 countries and even operated from aircraft carriers in naval variants. Now this is the Hawker Hunter. Often overshadowed by supersonic fighters like the Lightning, it quietly became one of the most successful British jet fighters of the Cold War. Entering RAF service in 1954, it reached 715 miles per hour and carried 4 30mm Aden cannons with rockets and bombs. The Hunter later served across multiple continents because of its reliability and exceptional handling. Supermarine Swift. Early technical failures gave this aircraft one of the worst reputations in British aviation history, despite later improvements solving many of its problems. Entering RAF service in 1954, the Swift reached nearly Mach 1 and carried two 30mm Aden cannons. Later reconnaissance variants performed effectively, while one version briefly held a world airspeed record during the 1950s. Gloster Javelin. Overshadowed by the more famous English Electric Lightning, this large delta-wing interceptor became one of Britain's most capable all-weather fighters of the 1950s. Entering RAF service in February 1956, it reached 710 miles per hour and carried Firestreak missiles alongside 30mm Aden cannons. Its huge delta wing provided strong high-altitude stability during night and bad weather interception missions. Now moving into Cold War interceptors and naval fighters. English Electric Lightning. Overshadowed internationally by aircraft like the F-4 Phantom and MiG-21, this interceptor still became one of the fastest climbing fighters ever built. Entering RAF service in 1960, it exceeded Mach 2 and could climb around 50,000 feet per minute. Armed with Firestreak and Red Top missiles alongside 30mm Aden cannons, pilots described it as a rocket with a man inside. Supermarine Scimitar. High accident rates and the arrival of aircraft like the Buccaneer and Sea Vixen pushed this fighter into relative obscurity despite its major naval capabilities. Entering Royal Navy service in 1958, it reached 690 miles per hour and carried four 30mm Aden cannons with bombs, rockets, and nuclear strike weapons. It also became one of Britain's earliest swept-wing carrier fighters. Up next, de Havilland Sea Vixen. Overshadowed by larger American carrier aircraft, this fighter quietly became one of the world's earliest missile-focused naval interceptors. Entering Royal Navy service in 1959, it carried Firestreak and Red Top missiles alongside rockets and bombs. The Sea Vixen lacked internal guns entirely, reflecting Britain's growing confidence in missile-based air combat during the Cold War. Saunders-Roe SR.177. Cancelled before production, this aircraft became one of Britain's most forgotten interceptor projects despite its advanced technology and extreme performance goals. Development began in 1955 using combined rocket and turbojet propulsion for rapid bomber interception. Designed for both RAF and Royal Navy service, the SR.177 carried airborne radar and could have rivaled advanced Soviet interceptors before missile-era policy changes ended the project. Finally, experimental and overlooked British aircraft, Fairey Delta II. Overshadowed by operational fighters of the Cold War, this experimental aircraft still became one of Britain's greatest aerospace achievements. First flying in October 1954, it became the first aircraft to exceed 1,000 miles per hour in level flight, eventually reaching 1,132 miles per hour. Its delta wing and drooped nose directly influenced later Concorde development and future British supersonic research. Blackburn Skua. Quickly outdated during World War II, this naval aircraft became largely forgotten despite achieving one of Britain's first major wartime naval air victories. Entering Fleet Air Arm Service in 1938, it combined fighter and dive bomber roles while carrying bombs and machine guns. The Skua later sank the German cruiser Königsberg in 1940 during one of Britain's earliest successful dive bombing attacks. Sopwith Camel. Overshadowed historically by later World War fighters, this aircraft still became one of the deadliest Allied fighters of World War I. Entering service in mid-1917, it reached 113 miles per hour and carried twin Vickers machine guns powered by a 130-horsepower Clerget rotary engine. Despite difficult handling characteristics, the Camel achieved more aerial victories than any other Allied fighter of the war.